Last time, we covered the early career of Gaius Marius in the post-Carthaginian world. Today, we will follow him into the world of Roman politics. The fall of Carthage would continue to present opportunities for the Romans in general, but Marius in particular. With the siege and eventual sack of Numantia in 133 BCE putting an end to the Celts' dreams of independence, Gaius Marius embarked on his political career in earnest. He made such a splash during the Numantine War that his name was submitted for election to the office of military tribune. He won that election without canvassing the populace, an impressive feat indeed. In his position as tribune, Marius would continue to serve under a series of distinguished generals. First, he participated in the subjugation of the Balearic Islands under Quintus Caecilius Metellus Balaricus, member of the powerful Metelli clan. The Metelli were a patrician family, many of whom had held the consulship over the last 2 centuries. The office of consul was a bit like the president or prime minister of the Roman Republic. In addition to the consul's role as the head of government, he personally was expected to lead the army. 2 consuls served at any one time, often with one remaining in the capital while the other was on campaign abroad. The Romans reckoned their dates by who held the consulship for that year. At home in the capital, the consul had civil and religious responsibilities. For example, one of the most important rituals that a newly elected consul did was to take the solemn public oaths, or vota, in the temple of Jupiter, that they would faithfully uphold the duties of the consulship. This ritual was thought to help maintain the Pax Deorum, or peace of the gods, which blessed the Roman state with peace and prosperity. In addition to their religious function, consuls served as diplomats between the Republic and foreign powers. Diplomats from abroad were required to meet with the consuls before presenting themselves to the Senate, if they intended to make a formal request of the Roman people. In the domestic political sphere, consuls had the power to summon any of the lower assemblies of government, including the Senate. They were also responsible for executing the decisions of these legislative bodies. Given how powerful the office of consul was, the Romans instituted several constitutional checks on them. Firstly, each consul had veto power over their colleague in office. Next, the consuls could be held responsible for their actions in office by the Senate after their 1-year term had expired. Lastly, the consuls were forbidden from serving consecutive terms. If a consul did want to run for a second term, he was expected to wait for a period of at least 10 years between terms. But how did an ambitious politician rise to this lofty position? A would-be consul had to navigate a perilous public and military career, sometimes called the cursus honorum, or course of honors. Entry to the cursus honorum required a baseline amount of wealth. That was because it began with about a decade of military service as an officer, culminating with the elected office of military tribune. Roman military ranks came with a price tag. No money, no rank. The lowest rank on the cursus, that of military tribune, was roughly equivalent to the modern American Army rank of colonel, putting the tribune in command of a Roman legion of about 3,000 men. The military tribune was one of 2 types. The second kind of tribune was the tribune of the plebs, which was only open to plebeians. The office of tribune of the plebs was enormously powerful. The main responsibility of the tribune of the plebs was to head the concilium plebis, or plebeian council, which gave the plebs a voice in the government. This council was responsible for making laws. They could propose new legislation, which would then be referred to the Senate for approval. If the Senate gave its approval to a bill, the plebeian council could vote for its passage, and the new law would be ratified. These laws then applied to all Roman citizens. The tribune of the plebs oversaw this process and could also veto actions of the Senate. it would behoove powerful senators to be very good friends with the tribune of the plebs so that they could coordinate their efforts at lawmaking. The tribune of the plebs, while extraordinarily powerful, was not truly a part of the cursus honorum, since the office was not a traditional magistracy, but a later invention in Roman politics. Regardless, the office was a necessary one to hold for any plebeian seeking an eventual consulship. The next office on the cursus honorum was that of quaestor. The quaestor was the army's paymaster. He also served as second in command of any provincial army. Two quaestors who were not assigned to the provinces stayed back in the capital and were known as the urban quaestors. These officers were responsible for maintenance of the public treasury and the public tax rolls. They also supervised public land sales and confiscations. After quaestor, a Roman politician would run for the office of aedile. That word is where we get the English word edifice. That's because the plebeian aediles were responsible for financing and maintaining public buildings, like state temples, while his partners, the curule aediles, were in charge of regulating markets and putting on certain public festivals. After holding the position of quaestor or aedile, a man of 39 years old would then be eligible for the office of praetor. This office was a bit like a combination of the offices of the American Vice President and Supreme Court Justice. That's because the praetor was the second in command after the consul and could lead armies in the absence of the consul either in Rome or in Italy. In addition, praetors had the power to overturn or uphold the ruling of lower-level judges. Marius advanced first to the office of quaestor and then in 119 BCE tribune of the plebs, with the help of his old commander Quintus Caecilius Metellus. This sort of political alliance was common. The Metelli, as powerful patrician senators, wanted the tribune of the plebs in their debt so that he would not use his power of veto to hinder any legislation that they might advance. Unfortunately for the Metelli, Marius would break with the family over the issue of voting reform. Traditionally, patricians controlled the government and were generally hostile to the idea of an expanded role of the average citizen in government affairs. For this reason, the problem of voter intimidation and interference from the patricians and their conservative allies was endemic. Marius, as tribune of the plebs, sponsored legislation that would protect the plebs from intimidation while on their way through the forum to cast their votes. The Metelli were deeply opposed to this idea and withdrew all their support for Marius over the issue, ensuring that his career would never advance to the rank of aedile. But Marius wouldn't let a little thing like that stop him. If he couldn't be aedile, then how about praetor? Plutarch tells us about Marius's failed campaign for the office. Metadeten demarchian, agoranomian ten mexonta. After his tribuneship, he became a candidate for the higher office of aedile. There are two classes of aediles, one taking its name of curule, because of the chair with curving feet on which the magistrates sit in the exercise of their functions. The other, and the inferior, being called plebeian. When the superior aediles have been elected, the people cast a second vote for the others. Accordingly, when it was clear that Marius was losing his election to the higher office, he immediately changed his tactics and applied for the other. But men thought him bold and obstinate, and he was defeated. Nevertheless, although he had met with 2 failures in one day, a thing which had never happened to any candidate before, he did not lower his assurances in the least, but not long afterwards became a candidate for the praetorship and nearly missed defeat. He was returned last of all and prosecuted for bribery. Modern scholars think that Marius lost the support of the Metelli, and therefore the aedileship as well. With his political support gone, the assumption was that he could only have won the praetorship through bribery, which he was subsequently prosecuted for. At the trial, Marius was able to acquit himself of the charges, which makes one wonder if he really did bribe the lower assemblies to get elected or not. In any case, he served an unremarkable term as praetor in 116 BCE. After his praetorship, he was assigned to be military governor of Hispania Ulterior as propraetor. Here, he seemed not to acquire much new wealth, but further developed a reputation for military excellence in his campaign against organized bands of highwaymen terrorizing the countryside. Once his term in Hispania came to an end, Marius returned to Rome and married. His accumulated honors and burgeoning reputation seemed to give him access to an illustrious patrician household that had fallen on hard times. The marriage was mutually beneficial to both houses. Marius got patrician connections he was otherwise lacking, while his bride, Julia, and her family now had access to Marius's wealth. This infusion of political and financial capital into Julia's family, the Caesari, would propel them into the beating heart of Roman politics with the eventual rise of her nephew, Gaius Julius Caesar. But that is a story for another episode. Join me next time as we follow Marius's continued meteoric rise in the Roman political machine. I'm Matt Lupu. Thanks for listening.